Hello everyone, I'm Chesty44 and welcome to this Let's Play of Blades of Avernum. Last episode we heard the story of the merchant, who was, let's see, the whole story was, he was delivering a package to Sigacel when he was attacked by someone, who I believe was a bounty hunter, but he was saved by the knight. He wasn't aware of it, but he was taken to an inn where he was able to recuperate from some fear toxin that left him dazed and confused. He managed to he managed to beat off some guys who were trying to rob him, ran to recover the package, was brought to Sigacel by, I believe, the man who told us to go to the Tavern Inn in the first place, delivered the package only to be attacked by guys who were pissed off that he was late, as it screwed over their plans, whatever the hell they were. He managed to escape, but that was only with the assistance of a mage, who happens to be this prisoner over here. So, we're going to speak with this prisoner here. You haven't seen clothes as pitiful as the ones on this man in quite some time. He wears ragged, threadbare teal robes that look like they haven't been washed in recent memory. The wearer matches him fairly well. His hair and beard are long, unkempt, and caked with dirt. He has a wiry, almost emaciated frame and gaunt face. A sorrier or less cleanly specimen you rarely see. He looks up from his large plate of food when you approach. He grins nervously and stammers, "No problems, are there, sir?" "Can I sit?" He contemplates the question for a while, longer than it should take to make up one's mind on such a simple matter. Finally, he nods and motions to the chair next to him.
Yes, I suppose you can. This is a monumental meal for me, and I wouldn't want to eat it alone. It's been a long time since I had someone to talk to. There's so much to talk about. So many things I've wanted to say but never could, and still probably shouldn't. I think, Bard, that you'll be tired of listening to me by the end.
Lay it on me. It's what I'm here for.
I shouldn't, you know. I know that I shouldn't speak to anyone, at least until I get as far away from Sigacel as I can. But yet I'm sitting here eating with you, and I know full well I'll wind up telling you everything. You know that you're the first man I've shared a good warm meal with in 5 years. Has it really only been that long? Feels like a lifetime. This morning I woke up with the knowledge that this day would be my last, yet here I am. I don't care if my loose tongue gets me killed. For whatever reason, I've been given a second life, and I won't live it in fear.
The prisoner's tale. Alright, let's hear it.
I woke up early this morning, as I did every morning, to watch the sunrise from the window of my cell. Sometimes in the afternoons I would look out at that cesspit of a city and wonder if it wouldn't be better to have a dark dungeon cell than be plagued with that sight. The corruption and foulness of it were enough to make me retch. But in the mornings the pigs were all indoors, and I would sit and watch the sunrise. If it weren't for that, I don't know if I'd have bothered waking up. I would sit and stare out the window all day. The noises, the people, the crime, the greed, it all sickened me. But I watched anyhow. It was there, so I watched. Sometimes in the distance I thought I could see the green of trees, but that was probably just a mirage. There was nothing but miles of stone and brick and noise. There were birds to watch, but not songbirds. They were loud, squawking gulls whose bickering could be heard all the way from the waterfront. They fought over fish and scraps, like their human counterparts. It was disgusting.
Tattered robes is all he's got.
I could hear the jailer rattling his sword against the cell bars as he walked down the hallway. He came to my cell every morning to change my bucket of water and give me my morning slop. He was right on time. The jailer slid a bowl of grey mush under the cell door. Didn't bother trying to decide what was in it anymore.
"You know the drill, wizard. Eat up and don't make me wait. You don't want me to send you to the gallows with a black eye."
He wasn't concerned about me getting my vitamins. The reason they forced me to eat that sludge every day was that they spiked my food with asp tongue mold. It's a mind-numbing drug. They make me eat it to keep me from being able to cast magic. I'm a wizard, by the way. Well, you don't cringe when I tell you that. I can't remember the last time I told someone who didn't cringe. Alright. Asp tongue keeps you from being able to concentrate enough to cast magic, but it also keeps you pretty dazed in general, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing when you're living in a 10 by 10 cell for 5 years. Certainly wouldn't hurt to be a bit more softened for that morning, because that morning was the last morning.
Yeah, that wasn't so difficult.
Once I'd eaten the last of the slop, it was safe for him to enter the cell. Once that asp tongue clouds my mind, I don't pose any more threat to an armed man than a child would. Let's get this over with.
Get some manacles on him and get the poor bastard out of here.
I'd already come to grips with the fact that this would be my last sunrise. During the early years, I had felt an intense anger towards those that had done this to me. I wanted to live, if only because that entire bloodless city wanted me dead. But that gradually gave way to quiet disgust. They weren't worth being angry at. I was going to stay alive just to spite those swine. If they wanted my life, they could have it. They would not take it from me, though, because I didn't want it.
I'm just curious what spells he has. Ooh, mage and priest spells.
As the guards led me out, it suddenly occurred to me that this was the first time in 5 years I'd left my cell. It was a ridiculous thought considering the reason for the occasion, but it made me smile nonetheless. I had given up on escaping my cell years ago. Just stepping outside of that dreary room was almost enough for me to long for life again. Just that taste of freedom was almost enough to rekindle vain hope. There was a large crowd gathered at the gallows. It was the first Saturday, and they'd come to get their dose of blood for the month. This was a larger crowd than was normal, though. They were hollering and jeering at us, but it wasn't for me. There was another man, a real celebrity, who was being executed that day. That's what all the fuss was about. It occurred to me that they'd already forgotten me. It's funny, you write it all down for them, but they still forget. They never really understood to begin with. They arrested me for it, hated me for it, would have killed me for it, but they never understood. And now I was going to end up as a side note to some celebrity's end. So it goes.
Huh. Interesting. That is more people in a single screen than I've ever seen. That's obviously the person who's going to be saved, but is that the priestess?
It was a temporary structure, nothing more than a simple wooden slat floor supported 6 feet above the ground by a wooden frame. There were 5 trapdoors in the floor and a T-shaped wooden pole over each. At some point it was temporary. It used to be that the frame was disassembled and reassembled whenever a criminal needed to be strung up. Some years back it had become a permanent fixture at the steps of the courthouse. The crowd had worked themselves into a fever pitch, screaming and hollering for blood. Not for mine, though. All eyes were on the man beneath the middle gibbet, the man on my left. He didn't look like anything special. There was a row of guards at the base of the platform with their halberds held out to ward off the surging crowd. An officer stood by the stairs supervising the proceedings. I could see his mouth moving as he shouted orders to the soldiers, but couldn't hear what he said over the noise. They couldn't hear him either. Eventually he gave up and settled with a hand motion to give the order. He held his hands straight up in the air. Okay. Perhaps the guards knew what these hand signals meant, or perhaps they just guessed what he was getting at. It's a fairly mechanical procedure in execution. There isn't much improvisation. They found a method that works, and that's that. The guards pulled out black hoods and lowered them over our faces. My guard fumbled with his a bit, first struggling to find the opening, then putting it on inside out. He pulled it off to fix it, when suddenly a crossbow twanged from somewhere in the crowd, and one of the guards fell pierced. More bolts rained down on the platform, killing guards as he struggled to figure out who was attacking. The crowd continued to scream, this time in fear. The guards were taken completely unawares, but they quickly readied to fight back. With the civilian crowd fleeing, it was easier to spot who was firing on them. Several guards had been circulating through the crowd looking for trouble, and these now moved to engage the assistants that had mixed in. Archers from atop the platform began firing on the attackers. A clamor from the south could be heard. It sounded like thunder and galloping hooves. It didn't take long for the source of the noise to come into view. It was a cart, and it was careening towards the square from the south entrance. It was a 2-horse cart. 2 men drove in the front, both wearing oddly painted blue armor. In the bed of the cart were 5 more men, all dressed the same and all armed to the teeth. Beside the captain at the edge of the platform, a red-robed mage stood. He hadn't stirred as the bolt struck his fellow guards, but now he began to prepare a spell. A fireball hurled from his hands to strike the back of the cart, sending its occupants hurtling into the air. The cart itself teetered precariously and almost flipped, but somehow the driver steadied the frenzied horses and made it the next 20 feet to the platform.
Get in! Get in!
The second driver turned around and screamed before standing to fire his crossbow. A bolt seemed to sprout out of the red mage's chest, sending him staggering off the platform. The cart was just a few paces away. I looked at the prisoner next to me, the man that everybody had been hollering about. He must have been the reason for all this. His guard hadn't been so clumsy with the hood and had already secured it. Somewhere in the subsequent fray he had been thrown to the ground, where he now lay helplessly, blind and with hands bound behind his back. I did the only rational thing. I dove in the back of the cart.
Is he in? Is he in?
The cart driver screamed. The other, the one with the crossbow, turned around to make sure. I lay face down, hardly daring to peek up at him lest he realize I was the wrong man.
He's in! He's in! Drive!
The wheels sprayed gravel as the cart took off. An arrow thudded into the bed just inches away from me, and another struck the back of the driver's chair. But we were off. I could hear the guards behind us shouting to try to organize a pursuit, but their voices were quickly fading. We were escaping. And come what may, at least for the time being, my head was out of the noose. Now I just had to get away before these well-armed men figured out that I wasn't who they were trying to save. I had a hunch that they wouldn't be pleased to discover that that man was actually still standing back at the gallows. Unfortunately, it's hard to get away when you're in a cart that's hurtling down the street. I was just working up the nerve to dive out. The cobblestone didn't look welcoming, but I didn't have a choice when the decision was taken out of my hands.
The watch will be in pursuit soon. They'll have mounted men, and we won't be able to outrun them.
The driver shouted to the man with the crossbow so as to be heard over the din of the rattling wheels.
When we round that corner, you and Durant dive out and get off the street as fast as you can. I'll drive the guards away from you. May the banner fly forever.
May the banner fly forever.
Now!
The man with the crossbow leapt into the back of the cart, grabbed me by the sleeve, and then rolled over the edge, pulling me with him. My meeting with the cobblestone was as unpleasant as I'd anticipated, but I didn't have time to think about that. We had hardly touched the ground before I was being hauled towards a nearby alley. We scrambled further down the alley, but halted when we heard the sound of pounding hooves. We hurriedly pressed our backs to the wall and stood perfectly still. Sure enough, a group of guards on horseback galloped past. The blue-armored man let out a sigh of relief, but I was already trying to think of a way to get out of there. He'd realize who I was in a moment, and then I was done for. I slowly raised my bound arms to strike him. I had grown weak during my captivity, but perhaps if I put all my weight behind the blow, I could stun him and make a break for it.
Master Durant, it is an honor to meet you. I am Gerald. Oh, your bonds. Here.
He grabbed my wrists and pulled out a small crystal key. He fitted into the manacles and they clicked open. Wait. Nice to meet you.
Is something the matter, Master? Were you wounded?
I had been trying to keep my face turned so that he wouldn't realize I was the wrong man, but suddenly an idea crossed my mind. He was a young man, probably no older than 20. He said he'd never met this Durant. Could it be that he'd never even seen the man before he went to jail? I hesitantly looked up and met his eyes. Yeah, I'm all right. Where to now?
We head back to headquarters. None of the others survived. A bit of a hitch in the plan, you see. It'll all be explained later. I'll just lead us back to headquarters. It's been changed since Samael took over, but I'll lead you there.
Luck was kind to me. Every man on the rescue mission had perished except one, the one who had never met the real Durant. I certainly wasn't going back to the headquarters, though. No, we can't do that. Gerald looked at me perplexedly, but eventually nodded slowly.
Yes, you're right. The streets will be crawling with guards. It's too dangerous to move in the open. I know a place where we can lay low for a while. Wait for the heat to die down or for aid to come. Good thinking.
Yes, that's what I'm here for. Before I could get another word in, Gerald had me by the wrist and was leading me through a maze of alleys and back roads. He knew his way around Sigurdsal, I'll give him that. Eventually, we reached an inn by the waterfront.
The innkeeper is a friend of the banner. We can hide out here. Headquarters isn't far, but we should make sure the coast is completely clear before we head there. We don't want to leave the guards there.
Yeah, sure. The spray was like any other waterfront dive. There were a few shady characters lounging about, but the rest were mostly sailors and derelicts. Standard waterfront folk. Gerald picked a table in the far corner and led me there. He called for a pitcher of beer, which I didn't touch. I'd been in jail for 5 years with nothing but water and mush, but I still had higher standards. We sat in silence for a while. Gerald was occasionally in awe of the legendary figure across from him. Occasionally, he would start talking about something related to this organization I was apparently supposed to be a part of, the Azure Banner. I would nod and occasionally grunt non-committally, not wanting to reveal my ignorance. It went on that way for almost an hour. My mind was racing for ways I might get out of this. I couldn't go back to this headquarters. Someone there would realize I wasn't Durant, and they doubtless wouldn't be pleased. I wondered if Gerald would pursue me into the streets if I made a break for it. If he did, he could catch me easily. He looked to be in rough shape, and I decided I couldn't risk running through the streets and attracting the guards' attention. I let my eyes roam across the room, looking for some way to get out of this bind. They froze as they crossed the front door, where a man stood that I couldn't be less happy to see. An old acquaintance of mine stood in the doorway. It had been going on 7 years since I'd last seen him, but I'd have recognized him anywhere. His name was Christopher Sly. I dropped my head the moment I saw him, hoping he hadn't seen me. I tentatively peeked up to find him craning his head in my direction, trying to see if it was really me. He'd spotted me.
So that was a year ago. I joined the Azure Banner the next day. I wanted to finally stand up to Cromwell and his thugs. I'd heard about your work in Cascadana, and when I heard what the banner was planning, I was immediately...
Gerald had finally worked up the courage to speak to his idol. I hadn't been paying attention, and now I had to cut him off. We need to get out of here. Is there a back exit?
Is there a back entrance? Why, are we in danger? No, never mind. I'll trust your judgment. This was a foolish idea. The spray isn't safe. Nowhere but headquarters is safe. There's a back exit to the west, before the stairs. It opens on an alley. There's a secret passage there in the north wall. It will take us to the docking district. In case we get separated, the new headquarters is at Warehouse G.
Sly was looking our way and beginning to approach. He would surely ruin my cover if he came over. All right, let's go already.
Sorry, this way. Follow me.
Emery! The exit was in sight just a little bit further. Once I was clear of the inn, I broke into a headlong sprint, no longer worried about attracting unwanted attention. I heard the door burst open behind me, and a moment later I felt a hand grab me by the shoulder.
Emery, it's really you. When you took off like that, I wasn't so sure. Damn, Em, it's been too long. I'd heard you had some trouble with the law. Where you been keeping yourself? You're looking kind of pale. I hope you haven't holed yourself up in some dark library for the last 7 years. I leave and you turn into a recluse. I don't know how the hell you thought you were going to get on without me.
I don't know you.
Emery, man, I know you haven't changed that much. You haven't gone daft, have you? You wouldn't be forgetting your old pal Sly? Ring a bell now?
Of course I remembered him. Sly had been a comrade of mine back before I became an upstanding citizen. Still, Sly was a friend, and normally a chance meeting like this would be an occasion for a drink and some reminiscing. Unfortunately, he caught me at a very bad time. A very bad time. As if on cue, Gerald interrupted.
What the hell is this about? What's going on here? Who the hell are you?
No, I'm sure I've never met you. I'm Durant, not Emery.
I can understand if you'd forgotten about me. Kind of rude, but still. But I know you haven't forgotten your own name, you old bookworm. I know you're messing with me. Looks like you grew a sense of humor in my absence.
Gerald was looking confused.
What is he talking about?
I looked around nervously, trying to think of a way out. You've got me confused with someone else. Wink.
Nope, I'm sure it's you. You still don't remember the South Creek crew ringing any bells?
I am certainly not Emery. Wink! Sly remained oblivious to my increasingly urgent winks and suggestive tones.
Now I'm starting to get worried. You haven't suffered some kind of head wound, have you? What the bloody hell is going on?
Well, Master Sly, it's been real nice meeting you. Unfortunately, you were clearly deranged and I have places to be. I turned to walk away from Sly, who was still protesting that he knew me. However, I was brought to a halt by the sound of steel being drawn.
Nobody is going anywhere until I find out what's happening here. Who the hell are you, and more importantly, who the hell are you?
The second was directed at me and was accompanied by a spear tip pointed straight at my throat. Well, you see, there's been a bit of a mix-up. It's all quite humorous if you think about it, really. Gerald didn't seem to find it at all humorous.
You imposter! I'll cut you to pieces! I'll cut you to bloody pieces!
The effects of the acetone from my breakfast were beginning to fade away. They'd given me a small dose, since I was supposed to be dead already. My head wasn't completely clear, but I could probably concentrate enough to cast magic. Although I hadn't cast a spell in 5 years, and this wasn't really an optimal time to dust off the cobwebs. I didn't have a lot of choice in the matter, though. Hopefully I wouldn't botch it too bad. I prepared a stun spell as I turned to face Gerald. Gotcha. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a man materialize out of nowhere. And when I say nowhere, I literally mean nowhere. 1 second nobody is standing there, next second there's a man with a sword. Now this obviously caught my attention. I whirled, mouth agape, to face this threat. I must have looked really stunned because it prompted Sly to step forward to turn and see what was so shocking behind him. Unfortunately, he bumped into me. It broke my focus. I told you I was rusty, and the spell intended for Gerald went off. Sly crumpled to the ground unconscious. Not at all what I had intended. The assassin, for that's pretty much the only explanation I could come up with for a man who comes out of nowhere with a drawn weapon, swung his sword at Sly. Or rather, he swung his sword at where Sly was standing. By this time, he was already halfway to the floor. The sword went whistling past harmlessly. Right into Gerald's breastplate, who swung right back with his halberd, sending the assassin rolling for cover. It looked like for the time both my threats were distracted. Gerald had said there was a secret passage to the north. I started towards it, but halted and turned back. Sly was lying on the ground, oblivious to the fight that was going on above him. He had been a friend of mine, and was a good fellow. I couldn't leave him lying there with those two, at least one of whom definitely wanted him dead. I rushed back to grab Sly by the arms and drag him towards the passage. The fight between the assassin and Gerald had moved to the west, where Gerald had drove the assassin back against the far wall of the alley. Looked like they'd be busy for a while. I slipped through the passage. I wandered through the maze of alleyways that served as highways for the city's less upright citizens. Unfortunately, they're only really useful as a way to get around if you know your way about. I don't. So I was stuck wandering aimlessly, hauling 180 pounds of dead weight that was Sly. I didn't know where I was planning to go, really. I had to get out of the city, but I didn't have any idea how to do that.
Oh boy, well, that happened. There's still going to be a fair bit more, I think, that's going to be happening. So, again, even though this is 5 minutes shorter, I'm going to end this episode here, because I don't know if I'm going to make the next 5 minutes. Next episode, we'll keep hearing about what's going on with Emery. Despite that awkward bit that just happened. The bounty hunter's after Sly. He wasn't after... Okay. Okay, Joe, so, to straighten things out again, the blue banner are... You know what? I'm actually not going to yet. I'm going to wait until I go through all the... at least this story before I try and put together more of this. Next episode, we'll continue on with the prisoner's story. Till then, I'm Chester44, that is the prisoner, Emery. This has been a Blades of Avernum Let's Play, and I shall see you all next time.